Welcome everyone to yet another episode of Disruption Talks. It's been a long time since I was able to see you. I think it was December, so it's good to see everybody back. So today our topic is engineering at scale. We're talking about the key pillars behind the Europe's fashion disruptor, distributor, something that you might simply know as a customer as Vinted. I've used it a couple times. I'm pretty sure that so have you. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Mindaugas, who is the VP of Engineering at Vinted. Nice to
Nice to
have you.
be here. Nice to be
Pleasure
here.
is all ours. Let me begin with just brutally quoting your Twitter, because the words that you chose to describe yourself are coding fearlessly, reading thoughtfully, watching closely, and leading humbly. So, very good to have someone who has it so figured out in terms of who they are, what they do. But I, and so will the audience, want to learn much, much more about you, Vinted, and hopefully more things concerning the industry. So you are a long-time Vinteder, if I may say. People are called Googlers. So you, with your 10 years of experience at Vinted, are a Vinteder, if I might use that word. So I imagine it's been a crazy ride between then and all of the developments you've seen till now. You must love the company if you're still there, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Vinted 9.5 years now. So and I absolutely love the journey and I love where we are now. We never used the word Vinteder before, so that's a new one. Maybe we'll start using it. And yeah, I had the chance to start at Vinted as an employee number 13. So I really had the opportunity to see the journey from like really early days. So when I joined, our office was a remodeled flat, so real startup vibes. And I still remember the second day of my tryout at Vinted. So the tryout happened before joining the company, and during that second day of my tryout, the founding team came back from their trip to London, where they've secured the investment. And when I heard them speak about their ambitions and the growth the company will experience over the next couple of years, I knew I'll want to accept the offer. I didn't tell them that, of course. I did some negotiations, as you do, and I understood that it might not pan out, and the company will be maybe it will the company will be spinning down in a couple of years. But even in that scenario, I knew that the journey will be worth it, and it was much more successful than I could have imagined at that point. Um, yeah, and I just knew that I don't want to miss that kind of opportunity. Later, I became much more invested into our sustainability-focused mission, but at first, it really was like very personal growth oriented.
okay. Yeah, I'm curious because, I'm pretty sure that, especially as employee 13, so the beginnings of the company, and I mean, no harm by this question. I'm genuinely asking because I would be asking myself the same question too. Were there some preconceptions that you had looking at essentially like a digitized secondhand store of sorts? Because if someone says I'm doing that as a startup, it's a different conversation wherein we're talking about huge valuations being everywhere and everybody knowing you. It's like with musicians, everybody wants to listen to them when they're huge, but just at the beginning of their career, people aren't that invested. Did you have this hunch that this is going to go so big?
Well, no, honestly, no. I had no idea that it's gonna become so big. And honestly, before my tryout, I had some of that trepidation. Oh, look, I'm thinking that this is like a secondhand marketplace. I'm not sure how exciting that is. Let's see. But it really changed during that second day of my tryout. Like that monologue that one of the members of the founding team gave about the future and the ambition, like just really captured my attention.
Okay, solid answer. So, apart from what you do between the 9 to 5 at Vinted, you also have some initiatives that you're involved in personally, right? So you just give back to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I've started still during my early days at Vinted. So me and my colleagues created this meetup group called Vilnius JS because there was no JavaScript oriented meetup group in Vilnius. and we ran it for a couple of years before giving up the reins to other people. And it's been running successfully ever since. And these days, I run this meetup group called Vilnius Tech Leads. I've started it for selfish reasons. I've had a lot of fun participating in multiple Leave Dev conferences in London, meeting other technology leaders, and I wanted to have something similar in Vilnius. And now it's been running for 5 seasons. Our latest meetup was last week, where the topic was first-time managers. I really believe that no one is born a leader. Like, leadership and management are skills you can learn. And I'm just happy that this meetup that I've created for kind of selfish reasons is, able to be useful to other people as well.
Definitely. I mean, community is everything, regardless of the business or profession or anything that you're in. Even if it's not for profit, it still is the thing to go. So, if we may jump into Vinted itself, we saw that Vinted separates the engineering teams into domains. Like, you got payments, you got categories, you got shipping. How does it affect the alignment of the whole product itself? I'm asking, basically, you don't plan it from the bottom up or from A to Z. You have to bifurcate or trifurcate, or how many categories there are, those domains. How do you align it, essentially? Because I asked you, how does it affect the alignment? Are there any problems? How do you make sure that there are no problems where these are intertwining but slightly separate streams, aren't they?
Yeah, so let me start by giving a bit more details about how we are organized, and then I'll try to answer the second part of your question. So correct, and like any growing organization, we have to divide our organization into multiple units. And at Vinted, we call those units consisting of multiple teams, domains. And domains and teams are organized around key business opportunities which coincide with the core user problems. And Vinted product specifically then is organized to execute the company strategy, and by also ensuring constant knowledge deepening in expertise areas or domains. So when we look at what our members experience, so our members start their journey when they learn about us and the problems we offer to solve in their lives. That happens with the help of our marketing efforts or organically through word of mouth. If it's marketing, most of our members learn about us through TV ads. That's less visible here in Lithuania, where I am, but in bigger countries, that's our primary marketing method. Maybe you've experienced some of that. And then after our members learn about us, they onboard to our platform and then diverge into sellers and buyers, and then communicate with each other, transact, ship, and finally leave feedback to one another. And this journey, the experience, is the lens we look at when dividing our product organization into domains. So different domains take care of different parts of this user journey. And then the alignment of the whole product is ensured through our structure and processes and how we set objectives. So we have aligned objectives for the whole product organization. So we know what we want to achieve over the coming year with our product overall. There are no separate product engineering and product objectives for each domain or team. There's just one set of objectives for our product organization. And so each team and each domain and the whole product organization really has to align and focus on a single set of objectives. And we primarily align between different levels of organizations, teams, domains, the whole product org through objectives. That's how we ensure that we're delivering towards the same end state.
Yeah. I mean, because I was thinking it's pretty much the situation when you have with a meme with three Spider-Men, like everybody pointing at each other. I thought that you're going to do that. I thought that you're going to do that. But I guess what you shared about sharing the objectives between or across those domains is what keeps it together. That's the glue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's different when there are, like, I don't know, 30 people in the product organization. But when there are 300, 400 people, you have to have more structure and more process to ensure that there's alignment. And as we grew, we had to create more structure and more process to make sure that we continue to be successful. When there are 30 people in the product organization, everyone can still talk with each other and figure it out, and that's what we did. But when the organization becomes larger, that's a different story.
Yeah. Founders, listen up. This is going to meet you one day, hopefully when you grow.
Hopefully, exactly. You still have to make a couple of successful steps before you actually have to tackle those challenges of 300, 400, 1,000 people organizations.
Yeah, it's not something that just happens to you. You have to be lucky to have such problems. And
Absolutely.
speaking of problems, if I might call it so, because on the face of it, when you look at Vinted, I'm not a technical person, but I have familiarity, not knowledge. So I can understand that in some sense, it's a database of the things that are being uploaded, connected to the user base. We have a way of uploading images, probably not videos. I don't ever remember seeing a video on Vinted. The measurements of categories, so what gender, what kind of clothing, what color, what size, all of those typical things that every e-commerce store somehow has to tackle. But I'm guessing it isn't that simple, because if it was, we would see other platforms popping up just like this, right? Why don't we see a simple white label copy paste Vinted that anybody could have done?
Well, at a very high level, it is that simple, but the devil is in the details. And we actually had a video feature at some point, but in our A/B test, it was not as successful as we first hoped. But
Okay.
then going more into the details of your question, so a lot of other marketplaces are B2C, or business to consumer. You can find many marketplaces like that, and the technical challenges in those marketplaces can be solved by using a lot of the available building blocks. Let's take search as an example, right? There are multiple great search as a service providers. So for example, Algolia, I think, is the most well-known one. And if you're building a B2C marketplace, your best bet is to use one of those search as a service providers. I think Algolia will probably do a great job for you if you're building something like that. The difference with Vinted is that we're a C2C marketplace. So it's
Yeah.
two people trading with each other. And in a lot of cases, these services don't deal well with our size and complexity. And even if they do, the pricing doesn't make sense for us, considering the behavior of our members and the average order value on our platform. A lot of these building blocks that are available is just not a good fit for us. And another good example is, search by image. For a B2C marketplace, the feature is easy to build. There are small companies that offer it as a service, and there's some open source stuff as well. But for us, it's a more complex problem because each item is uploaded by our members. We
Yeah.
can't guarantee that the background will be a single color, which is something you'll find in many B2C marketplaces. So it's a couple of things. Like, one, because we're a C2C marketplace, like the building blocks are not do not fit well for us. And the other thing is, our scale. Some of the building blocks don't work well as purely because of the scale we're at now.
I feel like what you just shared about the C2C and the impact of basically UGC, user generated content, in some way not being able to be categorized and filed, especially at scale, because you need automation at that scale. I think that's going to be a good quote for our team to share later, just on our socials, because I think it's a slight opener. I don't think that people really consider some marketplaces C2C or H2H as human to human, right? That's what I've heard, the lofty quote on LinkedIn, that it's not B2B, it's not B2C, it's H2H, right? So
Oh, H2H, that's not something that I've heard of. I'll have to use that.
human to human.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds
Vinteders,
much
human to
better.
human. Yeah,
That
just keep
sounds
it
much better
going.
than C2C. Yeah.
I mean, we can do some copywriting consulting, if you need. Um, So coming back slightly in the sense to my original question, when I asked you about how attractive was it to look at a virtual secondhand store at the beginning, right now, and I want to ask a question in a similar vein. It's a, I'm not being mean. It's just a trick question that I hope you have an answer for, just like for the first one. How much innovation can go on in a C2C marketplace? Like, what are the most exciting engineering challenges ahead? What can be done to even make the customer experience go like, wow, have you seen this feature, and make you share it to all your friends or put it on your Instagram story? Or perhaps, if not something that's publicly impressive, perhaps there's something under the hood that you're really excited about on the engineering front.
Uh, yeah. So um, for the last, well, first of all, let me just talk about some of the things that we had focused on for the last couple of years, and then I'll try to talk about the future as much as I can. So for the last couple of years, like the biggest challenge for us was certainly scaling. And for me, the word scaling has multiple aspects. So one, it's scaling the technology so that it would be able to handle the ever increasing number of members. So two, like it's not strictly an engineering challenge, but like scaling the team itself was a big undertaking as well, because we grew really fast. At we There were 30 people in engineering at one point. Then a year later there were 55. Then a year later 110, and a year later 220, and now we're nearing 400. So it was a challenge by itself, scaling the team that fastly. And then three, it's scaling the organizational structure, processes. When you grow as a company, as I said before, there's need to create more clarity around how you operate. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to operate successfully. And then on the technology side, we delivered some, I don't know, maybe they are not immediately obviously exciting things for the end user, but we delivered some really exciting technological advancements. So in the past, we in each country we had it separated completely from other countries, and today our platform is fully ready to be completely international. And that might not seem like a big deal, but for us, it was a big technological challenge, because we had before uh, each country before was using its own language. So in Germany, people were speaking German; everything was in German. And then in France, the French language was used, and we had to figure out, okay, how do we make it work so that this content that is uploaded in French would make sense for users who are using our product in Germany. And while product-wise, there's still no ability for everyone to trade with everyone in Europe on Vinted, architecture-wise, we're ready for that capability, and we're starting to use that capability more and more. We really hope to connect the whole Europe, and then everyone would be able to use Vinted, and Lithuanians be able to buy things from France. And then
Speaking, oh, sorry, go on, go on.
and then in the future, I'm not sure how much I can talk about some of the product advancements we're thinking of, but what 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 is worth to mention is that for any marketplace, um, uh, some of the key things will always stay the same. So people who go to buy something on a marketplace want to have a really broad selection that they can pick from, and they want to have the ability to find what they want among that selection. They want whatever they buy to be delivered as fast as possible to them, and they want the best price. And for a human to human marketplace, there's also the additional element that you really want to trust the human on the other end. And these are like the key, like, pillars that you have to build your marketplace on. And we want to make advancements in all these areas over the upcoming years, and to improve the experience. So the perfect experience is like when you go to the marketplace as a user, and the item that you want is immediately there, and it's shipped the next day, and it's great. It's a great price, and I think there's still improvement we can do with Vinted towards that. But you wanted to ask a follow-up question.
I mean, I didn't want to ask a follow-up question. I wanted to sprinkle some news because you were talking about logistics, about sending. Although personally, I think that the best scenario is not that it's delivered the next day. It's actually that it's someone across the street that I can go meet face to face. Because I think that's the magic of Vinted in some way, right? That those local exchanges, especially when the trust is being built with the handshake, with being able to see what you're buying, I think that's irreplaceable, really, right? But what I wanted to say about the logistics is it's news from just a couple days ago. Vinted's big romance with InPost, a Polish company, right? So some camaraderie between Poland and Lithuania on the business front, because InPost, for anybody who's watching but doesn't know, it's parcel lockers, the equivalent of Amazon lockers that you might have seen in the US or in the UK. InPost has been a huge company with huge successes expanding into more and more countries. And I read in the news that secondhand fashion marketplace Vinted has partnered with e-commerce delivery provider InPost to leverage its vast network of drop-off points. So very much in tune with what you said about optimizing, especially the logistics part, where people might realize that, well, maybe I'm not buying new Salvatore Ferragamo shoes, but I want to buy them as if I'm buying them on Amazon Prime and get them tomorrow, right? That is the expectation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for different item categories, the expectation is, of course, different. You talk about, maybe it's better that you can meet the person right across the street, and that can certainly work, and that's definitely part of the magic of Vinted. But then for more expensive item categories, maybe you don't necessarily want it the next day, but you want the shipping to be like foolproof.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's also something that you have to take into account as you think about logistics. Yeah.
Definitely. So speaking of engineering and speaking of exciting things, um, machine learning. Like, are you going to suggest things to me based on my previous purchases? Or are you going to make a model of my user profile and compare me to others and say, hey, you might like those things, something that I'm not expecting? You said that you don't know how much you can talk about the product, as much as you can without the NDA being broken, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. And absolutely, and we are already investing in machine learning. Recommendations and personalization is a big area, of course. I think it's a big area for many marketplaces. And our members, they use our platform to buy and sell fashion. And on the buyer side, improving their ability to discover the right item is huge. Of course, the challenge is a big one. So for B2C marketplace, it's a bit easier because you have a limited amount of items you're selling. So if you like electronics marketplace, maybe there are like a couple of hundred different items you're selling, maybe 1,000 different items you're selling. With Vinted, there are many more, and we don't necessarily can determine that it's the same pair of Nikes, like one uploaded by one member, the other uploaded by another member. Maybe they name them slightly differently. You don't necessarily know that it's the same type of Nike. So the challenge of recommending the right item becomes bigger for us. But it's definitely an area we've invested in already, and we will continue investing in. And I genuinely believe that machine learning specifically is a really great tool for any area if you have enough data. And the tooling around machine learning is becoming better and better. Like, we have to understand that machine learning as a field, it's still quite young.
Yeah.
And I really think that slowly but surely machine learning will become something that most teams can take advantage of. It will become more and more, in a good way, just another tool in the toolbox that you have.
Okay, so I mean, I always when I ask this question, I'm hoping that someone will like, like make me go wow and surprise me because I'm not saying that I'm underwhelmed, but I'm waiting for that moment where I completely didn't expect something that someone's gonna tell me. Like basically, you know what, we're gonna do the shopping for you. You don't even have to open the app. The machine learning will understand what you need, is going to understand what you have in your wardrobe, and it's just going to bridge the gap between what you might need. And it's going to understand from the calendar that you have, I don't know, your prom at high school, and you need a good dress for that. Those kinds of things where it's just going to be technology and mankind. But maybe I'm too futuristic. Maybe I'm too imaginative. Or too impatient, basically, because it's
Well,
gonna come. Just like you said, it's a young field. It's a very young field.
exactly. And the vision that you've just named, that's a nice one. I think that's I don't think that it's something that would work for everyone. I'm sure there are people out there who listen to what you just said and they think that that's not for me. I want to have my own selection. I just want to participate in that process more. But I think that it's something that definitely some people would be excited about. I would be excited about that kind of scenario you just mentioned.
Yeah.
But I think we're still a couple of years out before we can have that.
I was talking about this with one of our previous guests that essentially it's either that series and series hands are tied for privacy reasons, but I won't say the phrase because the sound bar will react to the Google command. But I so don't get why it doesn't understand, for example, that it has my location. It understands how I use Google Maps. It has my calendar, the ability to correlate the fact that I've been late 3 times. So it could just kick my ass a little bit and tell me, hey, I suggest that I would like to order you an Uber now, then you will be 5 minutes ahead of time. Simple things. It's not even some magic. It's just correlation of if late 3 times past calendar location and time, then suggest Uber based on current location, right? There are so many things that could be done based on the data that is just lying around. So um, I'm curious. I'm waiting for that to happen because it will happen. Some people, just like you said, might react that maybe I don't want technology to be so in my life, but it's going to happen either way. So might as well just happen faster. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So we have some questions in the audience, but we still have questions of our own. So my next question is on your LinkedIn profile. Once again, yes, we did stalk your LinkedIn, your Twitter. We've been everywhere. We can read that you participated heavily in recruiting, hiring, and helping build a great engineering team. So please, dear chef, secret sauce from employee number 13 to you have what? How many employees right now?
So the whole Vinted has something like 1,000, more than 1,200 employees, and there are more than 370 people in engineering.
300. Okay, so that's a solid fraction. That's a solid
Yeah.
fraction.
Well, if you're a company building technology, you want to have some engineers building that technology, right?
Definitely, definitely. A few.
Yeah. And yes, I did participate quite heavily in recruiting and hiring. And so when the engineering team was only 30 people, I participated in hiring very much hands on. There were some 9 months in my calendar when it was filled just with interviews and arranging the various steps of the interview process. Our talent acquisition team at that time was a single person. Because we were in a situation before that where we quite suddenly discovered the working strategy, and so we were not ready to scale that quickly. And then as the talent acquisition team grew, my involvement changed, and I'm still the hiring manager for some roles, but overall involvement is not as fully hands-on as it was then. And well, I'm not sure if it's a secret sauce, but I really tried to be transparent throughout the process with the people that I was trying to attract to the team. So I was, really transparent about where we are as a company, where we're going, what we're hiring for, how much we're paying, how are we evaluating engineers, what are the challenges. So I really try to be as transparent as possible, not faking in any way, just Here's what it is. Here's what Vinted is. Here is our culture. Here's how we do things. And I think that worked, because I think we were able to attract not all the people, but we were able to attract the right people that we can then build upon to scale our team.
Okay. That completely works. I'm not a technical person, so I was hoping to understand it just the way that you explained it. So you gave a little bit of the secret sauce, and continuing with that culinary metaphor, what are the don'ts while scaling teams? What are the things that I should not do in the kitchen, the engineering scaling kitchen, to not make a mistake, especially one that at scale will just grow logarithmically? What am I not supposed to do to not mess up the sauce?
Uh, so let me try to answer it from a slightly different angle. But so first of all, like fundamentally, I believe that great delivery comes from having highly engaged and non-dysfunctional and high-performing teams. And first of all, it takes time to create such teams. So you don't just put people together in a room and they're a great performing team. That's not how it happens. So if you want ideas of what not to do, so don't do that and assume that you're going to get great performance. That's not how it works. It takes a bit more time and effort, because it takes time to build for a team to build that trust, gel, figure out how to deliver together. So
Yeah.
and also then don't disassemble a high performing team, because that leads to a significant loss of productivity. Don't do that. Also, if you have a high performing team, don't pick it apart.
Yeah.
And then the challenge for us in that area was that our engineering team doubled headcount wise multiple years in a row, as I said. So when you're doubling your headcount, you have to change the teams, because we have more people, so the teams have to change, and then you're losing some of that performance. But we wanted to scale, so we had to go that way. And what worked well for us, and we tried a couple of different things that didn't work, but this is what worked well for us, is what I call it the amoeba pattern. So when we want to create a new team, we don't just try to assemble it from nothing. We grow an existing team to a bigger size. So let's say our usual engineering team is like 6 people. So we grow it to 8 or 10, and then we split that team in two. And we do this split in a way that ensures that both teams are similar in terms of tenure and seniority. And this ensures that both teams are in good position to start delivering. I think that's what you can do. I think that this pattern worked really well for us. If you want, we tried a couple of other different things that those didn't work as well. So this is not a don't. This is a do, but hopefully that's still useful. Want me to share a couple of more things, because I can go into.
Go on.
Okay.
Go on.
Another thing that this is also going to be a do, but another thing that worked well for us is the focus on hiring good engineers that fit our culture. And this might sound obvious, but like we don't focus on hiring engineers who know the exact programming language, Ruby, by the way, we use at Vinted. Instead, we try to select engineers who have just good software development skills in any language, and that we try to select those who fit our culture. These are the things that we prioritize above other things. I think that
Wait. Am I getting this right? You're telling me that the behavioral aspect, the attitude, the culture fit is more important than your actual involvement in the stack, because you believe that you can learn a stack, but you can't learn a behavior. Am I getting this right? That I don't need to be a coder in a specific language as long as I'm willing to learn Ruby?
Yes, correct. And
Okay.
that Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And like, both things can be learned. I believe that you can learn everything, but we do believe that just learning another new programming language, if you're a good developer, is easier than changing your behaviors. And that aspect that you want to learn a different languages is also something that we look for, because if you're willing to learn something new, that means you fit our culture of we grow. You're willing to learn, willing to experience new things. That's also something we look for. We also look for people who don't want to, there are those engineers who know their own favorite language, and they want to solve everything with that favorite language. And that's fine and that's good, but these are not the engineers that we necessarily look for. They wouldn't fit in our very pragmatic, solution oriented culture, where it's more about solving the problem than instead of solving the problem with that specific technology.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I don't need to be a technical person to understand that, if you can't build the house just with a hammer, right? You might need to change the tools up a little bit for the better job, because
Yeah.
Windows might not like hammers. Listen, I'm curious about the talent, because we talk a lot about hiring, and it can't be omitted the fact what's going on with hiring. Many developers getting crazy overseas proposals from companies just to jump ship. Companies getting huge rounds of funding just to satisfy the growth. And for growth, you need to complete tasks, and for that, you need simply fingers on keyboards, right? So I'll have a couple questions, perhaps concerning retention, maybe some advice for other tech leaders how to both attract and retain. Although, well, by what you mentioned just a second ago about this behavioral aspect being the driver for somebody's fit, I think that it's not difficult for you to be a very attractive employer. I'm also curious. I'll throw a curveball your way. Have you heard about overemployment? Have you heard about the
Over.
problem of developers grabbing couple remote jobs at once?
Well,
Going through there's been a thread on Hacker News, on Y Combinator's Hacker News, where people simply boast that they're going into $1.5 million a year because they grab a job here, a job there. They go through the 3 6 month trial period. Even if they get fired, they still got paid, but a multiple of the jobs that they had. And I'm curious, have you ever encountered that? And if not, what would you do if you actually did have such a situation? I think it should be easy to spot.
well, I hope it would be easy to spot. As far as I'm aware, I have not encountered it, and yeah, I also assume that it would be very easy to spot, because we have a culture where you know, I just can't. Yeah, for the life of me, I can't imagine that someone would be able to fake successfully doing multiple jobs. Like, that boggles my mind. It boggles my mind that people are able to successfully do that, and especially in, you said it was mentioned on Hacker News, so maybe it's like Silicon Valley, and I always assume that Silicon Valley is quite competitive. I just, yeah.
I mean,
Um,
even if you have just two time zones, right?
oh,
Or
so
or you
like
have,
working 14-hour days?
I mean, that's the thing, I guess, that they just slide through on what looks as if they're working, being online, being on stand-ups, responding, doing the bare minimum until the trial period runs out and they say, well, you're not being the most efficient. I know, I have been working 5 jobs at a time. So okay, it's interesting, because I've just seen a couple articles pop up recently about this. But back to retention and the normal way of hiring and keeping people on board. So, given the competitive nature, what you mentioned about Silicon Valley, given the fact that all of a sudden we can work for anyone from anywhere, even overcoming concerns of taxes or regulations with companies like Deal, they've been on disruption talks as well. How do you compete? How do you make sure that people don't just say, "Hey, I mean, this Silicon Valley startup just offered me this plus stock plus relocation package plus everything," right?
Yeah. So look, if someone is primarily motivated by cash, and a Silicon Valley startup will come to them and say, "Here's a million, come work for us." Well, there's not much we can do in that scenario. And the way that I look at attracting the right people, I look at it as really finding a good fit between the company and the culture that we have, and the person and what they're interested in, and the culture they want to work in. So my advice is really that you can't fake your way to hiring the right people. And I see some companies trying to appease to potential talents by embellishing the truth a little bit, using only compensation as a way to draw talent in, promising the ability to use the newest technologies. And for me, the reality,
Without dropping any names, do you have someone that you would like to like anonymously shame? Have you seen like a terrible job description or like an approach that for you was like, yeah, I can see right through this?
I'm not gonna drop any names, but I've seen more than a couple of, and I've heard stories from engineers who, they get promised one thing, then they come into the job and it's not what they were promised. So they get promised that you're gonna be changing everything, you're gonna be using this newest language, it's gonna be great. Come on in. And the reality is, maybe the company is using that language a little bit, but you're going to be spending 5% of your time on that, and actually you're going to be doing this old thing. And that's an extreme, of course, but those things happen. And
Okay.
yeah, and then going back to what I've said about fit, and the reality is that there are a lot of different great people out there. I generally believe that most of the engineers are good, and they'll do the good job in the right context. And all different people like different things. So at Vinted, as I've said before, we're not trying to promise something we're not. We have our own engineering culture. Some people will love our pragmatic culture, others won't. We really try to be forthright about who we are. If your goal is to use the shiniest, newest technology, and you're really focused on, I want to work at a company that, every month they try out this newest technology, it doesn't matter what the user wants. We're not the right company. We're really focused on solving the problems, and the tool that you use to solve those problems is secondary. And like we have a really people-oriented culture. Like one of our values is we care. So if you're someone who wants to be a bit of an asshole in your job environment, then you might not be the right fit for us. But there are companies that are different, and they might be a better fit for you. So yeah, like just general advice: don't try to fake it. Just be very forthright about who you are. You'll find the right fit, and those people will then stay with you for a long time if you do find that right fit.
And do you find that the majority of your workforce is from the motherland, or is it something that you have seen spread over and over and over across, or it just stopped mattering at some point? I'm not asking for specific percentages, but there are companies that even despite having the ability to hire remotely, they kept almost exclusively to their local place, while some companies simply embraced that and said, okay, I mean, if the time zone works for you, let's do it.
So for now, we have engineering teams in two locations, and that's Vilnius and Berlin. And we started hiring in Berlin at the start of which year it is? At the start of last year. But still, most of the engineering team is in Vilnius, and it was conscious choice. For a really long while, we operated in the single hub that is Vilnius, and most of our engineers are still in Vilnius. And we are able to find enough good talent. We were able to find enough good talent in Vilnius. Now we expanded into Berlin because we need to expand our reach. But we just didn't see a need, among other challenges, to also tackle the challenge of enabling remote work, because that is a different work mode. and you have to change how you operate to make that successful. It's not just, tomorrow we've decided we're going to start hiring remotely and everything will work fine. There are a couple of things you have to tackle before you are successfully enabling the organization to work remotely.
Okay, but I need to draw a division because hiring remotely is one thing, working remotely is the other. Surely there is the possibility of remote work at Vinted, right?
Yeah, so the way that we operate is that we expect people to come to the office, but you can also work from another country, especially during this COVID time. You can work from home, but I don't call work from home as working remotely. To me, working remotely means when you're like like almost a full year, you're spending time in some other city.
Okay. Okay, that's an interesting division. And why would you say that? Because I heard people call it workation, staycation, the leave the country, and I don't know, code from the Zanzibar beach. But working from home, you're saying that's not remote work? Why specifically?
Yeah, so I think it's different. So let's say we have a team that there are 6 people on the team, and everyone is and like the team is working remotely. So everyone is in different locations, maybe different time zones. That's one situation. Like the other situation is we have a team of 6 people. All of them are in Vilnius. They work from home most of the time, but they are able to meet in the office. They are able to go to team buildings together every week, whatever, right? And to me, those two situations are very different. And that's why when people say work remotely, I think of situations like the first one where everyone is really distributed and are not able to meet face to face, even if they want to. And work from home for me, it's still different because you are able. Like, generally, I assume that it's still co-located then, and then you can still meet other people on the team face to face.
Yeah, makes solid sense. So, one last question from me, and then we go to the audience. We call it the magic wand, but I'm holding an Apple Pencil, so I'm giving you magic wand, Apple Pencil, and I'm asking you this: if you could abracadabra that every 12-year-old in the world all of a sudden is given the gift of education, what education would that be? We've heard many things. People tell us about design thinking, about being smart with money, about emotional intelligence. We've had one guest tell us, leave the kids alone, stop teaching them. They're 12, let them be kids. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's just your answer. So you are doing the abracadabra, and every 12-year-old receives the gift of.
Can I have two?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the first time somebody's asked that, and I love it. Go on.
Okay, because two very different ideas jump into my mind when I hear this question. So the first one is something that you've already mentioned, and that's emotional intelligence. And that I mean emotional intelligence by you can understand and manage your own emotions in a positive way to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others. So I think that's just really important. And I'll talk more about why after I name my second one. And the second one for me is systems thinking. And let me give the definition of this one too. So system thinking is a way of making sense of the complexity of the world by looking at it in terms of wholes and relationships between those instead of splitting it into parts and just looking at the parts.
Yeah.
And I do believe that both of these, emotional intelligence and system thinking, are critical in this highly complex, globalized world we live in today. There's a lot of information coming at us, and we need to be able, and the future generation even more than us, we need to be able to deal with that information both on an emotional level and a systemic level. So we both need to be able to understand what's happening with us when we receive that information, what things are happening around us. And we also need to be able to process what's happening in the world in a systemic way. So emotional intelligence and system thinking. And don't force me to pick one.
No, seriously. Very, very good answer. Very good answer. And systems thinking, would that be equivalent of first principles thinking? Essentially, is that the same or like a cousin of that?
Cousin, I would say that's a cousin.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I think they're closely related. I think that if you possess one, you can. Yeah, it's closely related.
Okay. I completely agree with what you said. People keep forgetting that the amount of biological evolution that we've had versus the amount of cultural evolution that we've had is a huge disproportion. And many a time, this thing doesn't really compute things the way it should, but it computes the thing in terms of the lizard brain or instinctive reactions or things like I'm hungry or I'm cold, and understanding yourself and where your reactions come from to place yourself within the completely new things that we have logarithmic growth, not just of technology but of everything else. It is important for everyone, not just 12-year-olds, to understand that everybody's just trying to catch up. Everybody's just trying to stay up to date with the development and how your brain and the entire society's brain is just trying to make sense and say, yeah, this is okay. I'm not overwhelmed by all of this. This is exactly what my brain and body was expected from Mother Earth to give us. So once again, love that answer, and it's time for us to go to the comments. So Paulina, and I wanted to ask you, how much time do you have? Because it seems like we have 7 minutes until the final, until the full hour. But I'm good to stay longer if you are.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so we have a comment. I can't post it for some reason, so give me a second. I'll just ask someone from the team to post it on the screen, but I'll start reading it out. Users' expectations are constantly changing and growing, not only regarding fast delivery. Have you noticed any specific changes in user expectations and behavior over the last 2, 3 years, other than just get me my stuff really fast?
So I think that the user expectations generally are similar. Like I've talked about, you want things as cheap as possible, you want things as fast as possible, you want to have a wide selection. I think those were there a couple of years ago, where they were there tens and maybe hundreds years ago, and they will stay there in the future. I think those pillars have not changed. But what has changed is how the market is able to deliver towards those expectations. So now there are more and better apps, there are more and better delivery services. Everyone is trying to get you the best price. And I think that's changing, and the environment is highly competitive. And we as a company have to stay on top of our game to be able to deliver that better experience to our members.
Okay. And now I have another question, and the person that is asking this question might be familiar. We're just like the 007, the MI6 agency over here. We have our men and women back in the office just researching everything. And we see a question from Adam Mullen.
Mm.
Rings a bell?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he asks, how did you scale yourself from being employee number 13 to one of 1,000? Tips, tricks, wise words.
So it's hard to summarize, but let me like if I could just give one tip, it's really about staying humble and admitting your mistakes and being able to learn from those mistakes. Because I think, at least for me, what helped me be at least somewhat successful in this path that I've been on was this ability to really try to learn from many situations that I've been in. And I've made mistakes over the years. I think I was able to learn from them successfully. I think that there were painful moments when I had to admit that, damn it, I failed at this, but I have to admit it to myself, to others, and move on from there, having learned my lessons. If I could just give one thing, it's really be humble and try to learn from the mistakes you experience.
And that comes from humility, comes from emotional intelligence. Understanding your mistakes comes from systems thinking, right? So basically back to the abracadabra. And the last question, or no, actually, we have two. So this one comes from Ginny. Actually, the person who was kind enough to arrange this show for us. As you mentioned before, Vinted keeps expanding its borders, and it's a challenge for engineering teams as much as for any others, like marketing teams, to account for cultural aspects. Would you say that creation of separate tech hubs in the countries where product is operating is something that should be considered? Which is sort of like a play on you get to hire remotely from wherever you want, but you sell in places and you need to double the focus on the places where you're selling, so they're localized.
Yeah. And I understand this question is coming from this angle that you really want to understand your members and your
Yeah,
users, and to be able to understand them, you have to have talent that is local to that place. And I think there's a lot of value in talking with those members in those countries and really trying to get at what they expect and how the expectations are different per country. I think that can be achieved without opening tech hubs. We invite, we have conversations with our members. We look critically at their feedback that we get from them via customer support or directly or in any other ways. Our teams do interviews with our members where we really try to understand how they would react to new features, or how they react, what are their expectations towards existing features. So I think there's a lot of value in you know taking those cultural aspects into account, and not just cultural aspects but overall different expectations per market. But I think you need to uh, go towards the direction that you have to have tech hubs in all the countries you operate in.
fair point. You can be empathetic from afar, right? So
With the magic of technology, yes.
yeah, I mean, if it's the physical presence that helps people be understood, I think there were other problems in communication before, right? So
Yeah, but I do think there's potential value in having you know tech hubs in all the countries that you operate in and having that connection. It's just, but then you're really trying to figure out the trade-offs, right? Because opening tech hubs and coordinating between different countries, those tech hubs in different countries, also has overhead. So you're trading off that ability to be really close to members versus operational complexity. And in my mind, the trade-off is that you don't want to have tech hubs in all the countries, but yeah, not saying that there is no value in having those
yeah,
tech hubs really close to the members.
yeah, but I get what you're saying. It's a nice to have, but it's not something that is a blocker to achieve the same goal, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the last question from the audience comes from Katarzyna. She's excited to see you. She personally loves Vinted, so this episode is really interesting for her. And the question is, why are consumers drawn to businesses like Vinted? Do you think that we will see this trend continue to grow? Uh, and I also have a question that I want to sort of add to this one. Is Vinted going to be just clothes?
Well,
Secondhand has a lot of stuff, not just clothes.
well, first let me answer the first part of the question. So I think there are a couple of aspects why members are drawn to businesses like Vinted. I'm sure there are many more different consumers are drawn for different reasons, but the two primary ones are the sustainability aspect. I think that more and more people have become conscious about sustainability, and they're become because they become more conscious about sustainability, they are more okay with buying secondhand items. Maybe they even prefer to buy secondhand items because that's the more sustainable solution to any kind of problem that they have. And the second aspect is price. To be completely honest and transparent, if you can buy a similar coat for I don't know, 150 euros versus, I don't know, 100 euros on Vinted, then that becomes a very attractive proposition for you. I think those two are the main aspects why people are these days drawn to Vinted. So just price and the sustainability aspect. And
If I may, because Cashew, I also have an answer to this question. I found this personally. Sometimes what you're looking for, the brand that you're trying to find, is not here. There have been situations where in Poland, I just couldn't find an official distributor. So much like people are not able to watch things from ABC or Fox and they resort to streaming or downloading, not necessarily legally, here in the same vein, fully legally, but still, I couldn't find brand XYZ in any stores having their own boutiques. But hey, I go to Vinted and all of a sudden, sometimes I even have things that have been worn once. And it's almost like the store experience, slightly cheaper and giving me access to stuff that otherwise I wouldn't have.
Well, happy to hear that. And like I said, I'm unable to capture all the reasons people use Vinted. So yes, happy that that's the reason why Vinted worked for you. And then on the categories aspect, well, already on Vinted you can find some categories that are not just fashion. So I use Vinted myself, and we recently bought a book on Vinted. So there are some other categories that you can already find on Vinted. I cannot, I'm not going to discuss any future plans around the categories we have, but primarily we're fashion. Let's see what happens in the future.
Okay. I expected this is going to be the answer to my question. I was just hoping to, use the occasion to ask it. So I hope you don't hate me for that one. That was the last question of the audience. That are all the questions that we had between us. Are there any closing remarks? Anything you'd like to share at the end of what we just had over this fine hour?
Uh, I think I was able to share a couple of things that I hope that I was able to share a couple of things that your audience found interesting. It was nice to be here and fun, and thanks for having me.
Listen, just before we started, you told me that you haven't done many of those. This felt like I'm seeing somebody on Bloomberg doing those interviews every day. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, everybody watching, whichever platform you come from, see you next Tuesday on another session of Disruption Talks, and also see you this Thursday on another live streaming thing from Netguru. More to come in the comments on the socials. Once again, thank you so much for having us today. And everybody else, see you soon on your screen. Bye.
Bye.